Hi there, and welcome to In Conversation with Christina. This is my new podcast where I'm going to be discussing all things around eating disorders, body image, food freedom, also around my life, mental health, building a business as a dietitian, and everything else in between, because why not? I love to talk. If you know me or you know me in my personal life, you will probably know that. So I wanted to bring some of the conversations that I have with friends, family members, my own clients, colleagues, into a space where people are able to feel educated, feel empowered, and feel inspired to, do something new or step into something new in their life today. So that is what this podcast is going to be about. It has honestly been years in the making. I have had it on the back burner for so many years, but I really wanted to make sure that I had the space, the time, and the capacity to pour into this before I started this. And yeah, right now in my business and life, I do have that capacity, which excites me so much because, as I said, I love to talk. I love to talk about different topics. I love to even have discussions with other people on certain topics, which I will be bringing into this podcast. I'm so excited for you to be here. I thank you for giving this a listen and tuning in to this first episode. And yeah, there's going to be many more episodes that do come. This podcast, as I did mention, it is honestly going to be a bit of everything. And that is why I have named it In Conversation with Christina, because it's not an eating disorder podcast. It's not a body image podcast. It's not a just life podcast. It is honestly going to be a bit of everything, and a bit about my journey of where I've been, my mental health journey, my eating disorder journey, and everything else in between. So yeah, that is what this podcast is going to be. And I honestly can't wait to dive into it. If this is your first time listening, or you have never heard my voice or who I am ever before, hi, welcome, nice to meet you. My name is Christina. I am an eating disorder dietitian and a body image coach, and I help you to feel normal around food and make peace with your body. I also work in the recipe development space, so that looks like me creating recipes and content for other brands and companies to use on their platforms or in their apps. So I also do a lot of that freelance work as well. And then I also do a bit of brand work and a bit of social media work as well. Yeah, we do lots of things within my business, but that is exactly what I enjoy and what fulfills me. And yeah, you'll see here a bit of everything within this space and podcast. Today's conversation is going to be really about my eating disorder journey, and I will dive into a bit of my background and how I kind of got to where I am today, but really going into my own eating disorder journey and really talking about my journey through that, because I honestly have never actually done that before on a platform, I guess in length and in detail. So that is what today's podcast is going to be about. My aim of this overall podcast, as I did mention at the start, is I want you to feel educated, I want you to feel encouraged, and I want you to feel empowered by this podcast. And I hope that you leave this podcast or you leave this episode wanting to try something new or step into something new, whether that is your recovery journey, whether that's your body image or your food freedom journey, or if that's in your career, in your life, in relationships, whatever it is. I think life is too short if we're going to be cheesy. And yeah, I just want to inspire you to step into something new, whatever that looks like, whatever that capacity looks like for where you are at. And that's really my aim with this conversation and this podcast. So today I really want to dive into my eating disorder journey, but also discuss and talk about a bit about my journey first, how I actually got to where I am. I do actually want to spend a whole episode going into this in detail, because I get questions all the time around how I got to where I got to, what I did to get there, the process, all of these things. So I do want to spend like a whole episode going into like my dietetic journey and my business journey and everything with that. But I will just give a brief overview. So I did a bachelor's of nutrition science and exercise science at the University of Queensland. So that was a 4-year undergrad degree, and I honestly had so much fun doing it. It was such a good uni experience. It was hectic and my nervous system was fried, by the end of it. And yeah, I probably like didn't really have a social life for those whole 4 years, but it was a lot of fun and I learned so much. I didn't enjoy the chemistry part because yeah, that nearly sent me overboard. But it was worth it to get into dietetics. And then from there, I did that undergrad and I did a year and a half of the Masters of Dietetics at the University of Queensland, which then was allowed me to become a dietitian. So my undergrad allowed me to technically be an exercise science and a nutritionist, but my master's then kind of cemented the nutrition and dietetics. But yeah, and I didn't really do anything with the exercise science side of things. But yeah, that's how I kind of got to where I am today. I started my Instagram account in my second year of my degree, and that was because I was listening to a podcast and someone was talking about how they started posting their recipes on Instagram and then it kind of gained traction and they made their own recipe ebook and they were working with brands. And I remember listening to it and thinking like, oh my gosh, like that is such a cool job, being able to work for yourself and cook and make recipes and make healthy recipes and like food content. I was like, that sounds so much fun. And so this person also said that what they did is they started their Instagram account and then that's how it kind of gained traction and they got work from that. And so I was like, I need to start an Instagram account. So I think it took me, I actually don't know, but it took me a little bit to kind of send it and start the Instagram account. But when I finally did, I was like, if I'm doing this, I'm going to be consistent, which I have been for the last, I don't know, 4 or so years, ever since I started that account. But yeah, started that account, started posting videos and photos, or actually photos because Reels wasn't even a thing back then, but I started posting photos of my food. And then yeah, kind of gained traction. And I remember I even got like my first like brand deal, I think at like nearly 2,000 followers. I don't really remember, but yeah, I started working with brands. A lot of it was like contra deals. So that's where they like send you stuff and you create recipes for them and they might reshare them or use them on their own page, which that at the time like also was gaining me like a lot of followers. So yeah, I was kind of doing that for many years and then actually started to really like develop like the recipe development side of things. I started actually like putting more time and effort into recipe development, you know, getting a camera, getting the equipment, doing all those things. And that kind of developed over those years as I was studying my undergrad. And then once I did finish my undergrad, I actually got a job in a private practice as a nutritionist. So I did then start working there and I worked there all through my master's degree. So that was really cool to have that experience to actually work alongside clients as I was doing my master's degree, which is very rare, but it was such a cool opportunity. And I actually got that opportunity because the person who actually ran that business followed me on Instagram and actually reached out and asked me if I was interested in the role. So that's why I also say like social media is actually such a great place to get job opportunities. And all of my job opportunities I've ever gotten has come from social media. So that's why I always say like, if you're a student and you're listening, like start an Instagram account if you want to work in this space because you have no idea what doors it might open. Even if you don't want to go down the recipe development space, like it can open just so many different doors. So yeah, I did that job in my undergrad or my master's degree and did my master's of dietetics, which was also such a good experience. Like I had such a grateful experience at the uni that I went to and the support that I received. And then when I did finish that, I decided to then go full-time in my business once I finished because I honestly like there wasn't much thinking behind it, but at the time I was like, I've been at uni for the last 6 years. I am used to earning pretty much next to nothing as a uni student. So going into my own business, like there wasn't much of a jump because I was like, I'm going from pretty much earning nothing to maybe earning like a tiny bit more. So I actually, even in that, and I'll probably go into this whole thing in another episode, but I declined a job, like a full-time role that I got offered even before I graduated. I declined that. Mainly the reason why I did decline that though is because, as I mentioned, like uni was so stressful for me. It just fried my nervous system. And I was like, I physically cannot go into a full-time job. I was like, I will burn out. I will hate my career, all the different things. So when I did finish my master's, I actually didn't want to work full-time for the first 6 months because I was like, my body can't take it. My mind can't take it. Like I just need a break. And I'm honestly so grateful I did that. But that was like one of the reasons why I did decline that job. But then also because I just knew my long-term goal was to work in a business, like work on my own business, to create my own business. I also didn't want to work on a hospital for 5 days a week. Like the thought of that really just, yeah, did not make me thrilled or happy. And I also didn't want to work in a private practice for 5 days. Like I wanted to honestly be able to maybe get a part-time job somewhere and then work on my own business on the side. But I also, at the time, I was just like, why don't I just give my business a go? And if it doesn't work, I'll go and get a job. And that's what I always say to people, like there's a lot of us like choices or decisions that we have in our life. Like you can't really mess anything up super, super bad unless it, there's death involved. A lot of things in life, there is ways around them. And I always say, like, if something doesn't work out, I was like, there's always another option. I'll go back and do something else, or I'll go get a job, or whatever it is. So yeah, that was like my mindset. And I started that 2 years ago. And I've been in that full time ever since. And I love it so much. I love what I do. I love, I guess, what I've kind of built in my life and the career that I have built. And now it gives me this opportunity to be able to speak to more people, to be able to even create this podcast, and to, yeah, bring more conversations about that whole journey. And then also, I guess, in the areas that I'm passionate about around eating disorders, body image, and food freedom. So that's a bit about my journey of how I actually got to kind of where I am today. And this is why I'm so passionate about even sharing my journey, because I'm like, it is possible. It is possible to do these things. But today I really also wanted to dive into my eating disorder journey, because I've never actually sat down and spoken about my journey with my eating disorder in detail, because there's always, like, on Instagram, it's kind of really hard to do that unless I sit down and record like a 10-minute video. I think podcasting is one of the best platforms to do that, which is why I've kind of saved that for when this kind of came to fruition, which it is now. So yeah, I'm kind of just going to really dive into that. I will actually give a disclaimer that I will be talking about eating disorders, in particular anorexia nervosa. I will also be discussing body image and also anxiety and depression. So if that is triggering to you, or at the moment where you are in your journey that does not support that, like, please just take wisdom in that. Pause it, turn it off, and come back to it at a later date, because yeah, I do want to also support you where you're at as well. So yeah, let's dive into it. Growing up, I grew up in such a beautiful home, but I think with everyone, like everyone in this world, like we have grown up in this society around diet culture, around this idolization, around this thin ideal, around these beauty standards, around dieting. I guess my parents, culture, and environment and generation that they brought up in, like dieting was very normal. It was very normal to, talk down about your bodies, to hate your bodies, like all those different things. So I've grown up in that environment. That is, I'm not special in that. A lot of people can relate. But through that also means that I have been then conditioned to learn certain things around my body. I've been conditioned to learn that, thin is good, fat is bad. I've been conditioned to learn that, you must be attractive, or you must be thin to be attractive, or you must be thin to feel good enough. You must be thin and fit, or whatever it is, be loved by men, like all of those different things. So I've grown up in that environment, and as I said, I'm not special in that. Like most of us can relate to that. But yeah, growing up in that environment, that obviously planted different beliefs and different seeds in my life that obviously over time just escalated into different things that eventually also then spiraled into a full-blown eating disorder. But I guess that's how my journey even started. And one thing I do say, even to clients that I do work with, that if you don't work on your relationship with food in your body now, I can guarantee that it will be passed on to your children, whether you realize it or not, because your children are like sponges, and they will take in everything you say. Your behaviors, your actions, so many different things. I myself am not a parent yet, but I do know when I talk to parents, or I work with parents that do work with me, they start to say things like, yeah, I started noticing my kids were picking up certain food behaviors, or they wouldn't eat that, or they would say certain things. And that is because, yeah, it is true that people as children, we pick up literally everything that is around us. So in my own journey, I picked up certain beliefs, behaviors, and habits from my environment, right? From media, from social media, from television, from, all these different structures that are in place that play into that. And as I said, I've then grown up thinking that, one type of body is ideal, one type of body is attractive, all those different things, and one type of body isn't, right? My earliest memory of my body image was, if we do look at the science, we know that by age 3, we start to actually understand and get awareness of our body. By age 5, we actually start to develop our body image, right? And that is influenced by social media, environment, all these different factors. So it actually happens so much younger than we think. But for me, I think obviously growing up, there is different things that I remember where I'm like, oh, I remember this person said this to me, and I remember this person, said that I had big thighs, where I noticed this person said that I was always a big girl or big boned, right? So there's things like that that I remember. But I think growing up, mostly I was a very sporty girl. So I always saw myself as someone that was a bit bigger than, some of my friends. But I always kind of put down to like, oh, I'm just a sporty girl, right? Like I'm still really fit, all those different things. So growing up, when I think back to it, I'm like, oh yeah, like my body image was like, it wasn't too bad. But then I can think back to also other times where I'm like, I wouldn't wear certain things, or I'd feel so insecure at swimming carnivals where I'm like, I didn't even want to go, when I'm like, I was so into sport that I'm like, I wanted to swim, I wanted to do the things, but because I was insecure about certain things, it made me feel so ashamed and all the different things. So growing up, there was always those little kind of seeds that were planted. I think the earliest memory of actually going on diets and things like that was probably in year 10, where I would spend so much of my time like looking through diets, searching, trying to figure out what's the best diet to lose weight, what's the best exercise to do to lose weight. I started buying those like really lower calorie meals that you can kind of buy from the shop, started kind of trying to eat those to like lose weight. But little did I know that because they were so low calorie and I was trying to like avoid all the other food, when I would just come home from school, I would literally just like raid the cupboard and just eat all the things because I was just so deprived, like physically and mentally. And that's even like, I guess, a symptom of binge eating that can be really common, right? That restriction and then overeating at the end of the day. And then if that goes on for a long period and over months, like that's where we then start talking about this binge eating disorder. It was something that was always there, but it wasn't something that I remember that was completely like overwhelming to the point where I actually talk about later in my journey, I guess once I left school, where it's like, it took over my life. So during school, it was there. It was very, I guess it was pervasive, but it wasn't this thing that completely took over my whole life and my identity. So that was kind of my journey. And then when I finished school, I started going to F45, and I'm not like throwing any shade at them, but back in the day, it was really common to do like these 8-week challenges where they would like slash your calories so ridiculously low, and you would do these 8-week challenges. You would like work out a crazy ton, and a lot of the workouts were like jumping around and just really cardio focused. And I remember I did one of those. I started going to an F45 gym. I was like, oh, this is fun. Like I'm enjoying this, because once I finished school, I wasn't really doing all the sport I did in school. So the next thing for me was like, oh, I'll start going to a gym. So start going to F5. I started doing one of their challenges. And yeah, as I kind of started doing one of these challenges, I was like following this meal plan. I remember I would eat literally chicken, zucchini, and mayonnaise for this whole like 8-week period. I don't think I ever ate bread, rice, like whatever it is. But at the time I was like, oh, this is like healthy. Like this is what healthy is, right? Only eating these 3 things. Like I am the pinnacle of health. Like I have made it. Like I genuinely remember thinking that, and I was like, oh my gosh. Like I look back and I'm like, wow, that's funny. But yeah, that's, I guess the messages that I've kind of got. And luckily now we have so much more information and education around all these topics, which is just great. But at that time that was like normal. So did my first 8-week challenge, lost weight by doing it. I remember when I started it, I was kind of like, oh yeah, like, I'm getting the hang of this tracking thing and things like that. But by the end of it, I remember that I wouldn't even eat out. I would take my like little meal prep of like zucchini and chicken and mayonnaise like out to dinner, and my friends would sit there, eat their meals, and I would sit there with like my Tupperware container, and I was like, oh sorry, I can't, like I'm on my challenge. And they were like, oh yeah, cool, like whatever. But yeah, it was honestly this thing that was like, again, at the start was very naive and just went from like 1 to 100. It went to me then literally counting every calorie. It then went to me like understanding all the calorie intake and like tracking everything down to a T. Like stop eating and drinking so many different things. I was like, can't have sugar, can't have refined sugar, can't eat gluten, can't eat dairy, like can't eat all these things, right? Because I was like, they're poison, they're going to kill me. If I eat them, I'm just going to gain weight, all the different things. So that's where kind of that started. And as I said, I did one 8-week challenge. I lost a bunch of weight. And then during that process, that's where all the compliments started. That's where everyone started being like, oh my gosh, like, what are you doing? Like, you're looking amazing, like all of those things. And that honestly just fed that insecure girl in me that like never felt good enough in the way that she looked. And so having all this affirmation and these compliments from people when I started losing weight made me like, my brain kind of went, oh my gosh, this is a good thing. Like, losing weight is getting the attention, it's getting the love, it's getting the attention from boys that I desperately wanted, because I was like, oh, you know, I need to look a certain way to get this attention from men. So that was all getting fed during this whole journey. So I did one 8-week challenge and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. Like, I have made it. I have, you know, I'm getting all this love and appreciation that, you know, this insecure girl in me is like deeply craving. And that's a whole nother thing that we can go into. But yeah, that's honestly what it was. It was this need to fill this void of feeling good enough, feeling accepted, feeling loved. And as I started to lose weight, that's what I started getting from these outside sources, which just made me think that, oh, I was doing a good thing. Like, what I was doing was healthy. So yeah, did my first 8-week challenge, and then there was like a 4-week gap, and I just kind of went back to eating normal. I think my weight like went up a couple of kilos, and then I was like, oh no, this is bad. Like, I need to do another one. And then another one came around, so I did another one. And this time, the second one came around, like, I just like turned up the notch like tenfold. In that time, never ate out, stopped drinking, like only drank black coffee, only, you know, didn't eat, like, I remember I didn't eat sushi, like so many things. I was like, I can only eat my chicken and my meat. I stopped eating red meat because I was like, red meat's bad for me. Just like all this nutrition BS that was like in my mind, that I literally just, yeah, cut out so many things, started again dropping weight. I then lost my period. And I remember this thing in my head being like, oh my gosh, I've lost my period. Like, I'm doing a good thing. Like, I must be so healthy that I have lost my period. Like, this is a good thing. That's just how much I didn't have this education around so many different factors at the time. Little did I know, losing your period is like a very horrible sign that your body is not feeling safe. It's also not good for your hormones, your brain, your heart, your health, your bones, all the things. But at the time, I didn't know. And again, I thought I was doing a good thing. I thought I was being healthy. Yeah, little did I know it was completely not. I did the second round of this challenge, and again, I just got all of that affirmation again. People were just saying, oh my gosh, like, what are you doing? This is amazing. You know, you're doing such a good thing. And that's exactly what I thought. I was like living in this fantasy world that was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm doing a good thing. I'm losing weight. I'm getting the love and acceptance and all the things that this like little girl and this like little me wanted. So of course I thought it was a good thing. Of course I was like, I just need to keep going. I initially like had this number in my head of like, this is what weight I want to get to. And I got to it, I was still unhappy. And so I was like, oh, I just need to make it lower. Like, that's going to be the thing that will make me happy and reach this point in my head. And that's the thing about these like weight loss journeys and these journeys that we do go on to reach like a certain number. Like, I'm not saying it's all wrong, but we have this idea of like, when I reach this certain number, I'm going to feel a certain way, right? And I can guarantee you, like 100% of the time, you'll reach that number and you will just want more. You won't feel good enough. You won't feel this feeling that you think in your head you're going to feel, because as lame as it sounds, like, it's an inside job, right? And I'm all for people, you know, pursuing health and all those different factors. But I'm like, when you're pursuing looking a certain way, getting to a certain one number or whatever it is to feel some sort of way about your body, you will get there and not feel that way at all. Because when it comes to seeing yourself as good enough, you know, respecting your body, all those different things, having an appreciation for your body, it actually has to come first before you pursue these other things. But yeah, as I said, I did this 8-week challenge. Everything just dialed up another notch. I was training more, I was cutting more calories, I was more restricted, I was more obsessive, I was weighing myself constantly. I've lost a lot of weight, and for my body and my shape and for what I know now my weight being at, and that is healthy with a healthy period, I was so much lighter and I was not healthy at all. So yeah, did did another round of that. And as I came out of this, I hadn't had my period for like 6 months now, and I was kind of like, oh, like, maybe this is a thing, like, I don't really know. But again, just kind of palmed it off. And I got into this number that I thought would be the number that would make me happy. But I literally remember being at this number and feeling so insecure, feeling so unhappy in my body. I'm like, I'm now too skinny. I was like, I didn't like the way I looked. I thought getting to that number would be the thing that would make me happy. It would make me feel accepted, all these things that like this, I guess, eating disorder can, convince you that getting to this certain number is going to make you feel. I felt the complete opposite. I was more insecure with my body. I was more obsessed around food. I was more unhappy in who I was in my life. That's when I started really struggling with anxiety as well, because what happens when your brain is malnourished is that it literally changes your brain chemicals. Your brain can't produce the chemicals it needs to have a good mood and to have a good mental health, which is why people that do struggle with eating disorders and disordered eating, usually that co-occurs with other mental health disorders, right? Because when you're not nourishing your brain suffers. It starts to atrophy. It starts to shrink, right? You can't make like cognitive decisions properly. You're very rigid in your thinking. And so, yeah, I started having really bad anxiety. I started having panic attacks. I started like having these episodes of depression where I was like, I pretty much had lost who I was. But, on the outside, I was skinny and everyone was complimenting me. So I was like, oh, like I'm doing a good thing. But really, I was like suffering inside and so unhappy with my life and where I was at. After that little stint with F45, I kind of got out of that and I was like, I want to build muscle now. So I actually found a trainer, and this trainer actually really helped me along my journey. She started on working with me to actually increase my food to build my muscle and to actually regain my period. So we started working together on that journey to actually help build more muscle. I was doing like PT with her, and she was giving me, I guess, my macronutrients to actually help me to gain more muscle and more weight, because that's what I wanted at the time, because I was like, I lost all this weight, I was way too skinny, and I was like, well, no, I want to build back some of that muscle now, and I also want to get my period back, because there was, I guess, more education, coming out then around not having your period is actually not a good thing. So that's why I started to kind of look into that. I started to look into how I could actually start to, look at my health a bit more. So that kind of went on, and this probably now had been like a year or two into my journey. And when I started with that personal trainer, I think we worked together for probably like 6 months, and she really helped me come out of a place of like severe restriction to actually like eating more, to putting on a bit of weight, to actually building some of that muscle. And I honestly had gotten to a place where I believe that, my relationship with food, my body was actually getting a lot better. And I was getting to a place where I was like, okay, cool. Like, it is getting better now. I'm able to, eat out and add all these different things in. I actually started to see that progress, and I wasn't so completely obsessed with who I was, my body, and that was like my whole identity. I was like, okay, like, life is starting to look a bit bigger again. So that was kind of my first journey. And I guess even through that process, that's when I got, diagnosed with an eating disorder firstly. So went to the doctor. I didn't get treatment through that. There was not as much information around it at the time. And because as well, I wasn't under the BMI, like I was on like the verge of like the BMI scale, which is like a whole nother conversation of being diagnosed with an eating disorder, that at the time the doctor was kind of like, oh, like it's not a big deal, it doesn't really matter. So that was kind of like the first bout of it. And as I said, started training with this personal trainer, started to put on a bit more weight to actually gain muscle and to, work at gaining my period back. I can't remember. I don't think I actually gained my period back within that time. And I think during that journey as well, I was doing a lot of weight training, but I'd kind of like lost my taste for it, because I, for a year and a half, just belted my body with weights and cardio consistently, that I was just like so over it. The other thing I was noticing is, and this is another side effect of eating disorders, is like my hair was falling out, I was getting injuries. So I started to look at like ways to kind of slow down my movement, and I started to really kind of get into a bit of yoga and a bit of Pilates, because I was like, I'm getting injured all the time. I need to regain my period. And this trainer at the time was like, we need to balance your training with your food as well. Like you can't be overtraining and things like that. So that's why I started to also look into slower forms of movement. So started pursuing that, and I think I was like really excited to make a bit of progress on my journey of like regaining this healthy relationship with food and my body. And then through different life circumstances, and I will talk about this, but my parents went through a divorce at that time, which again, this is like another thing about a broader thing around eating disorders, that an eating disorder is a coping mechanism for something going on in your life, right? Whether it is a breakdown of a relationship, like whatever it is, there are so many different factors that play into this. But ultimately, an eating disorder is a coping mechanism for something else that is going on in your life, right? And this eating disorder comes in for you to gain control and feel safe in this disorder, in this control around food in your body, because things outside of your life feel out of control. And so my parents went through a divorce, and I have so much love and respect for my parents in that. But my parents went through that, and I also went through a relationship breakdown at that time personally, which kind of spiraled me into a relapse of my eating disorder again. So I had started with this trainer, things were kind of going well. I think I then stopped seeing her for a bit because I was like, oh yeah, no, like I'm able to manage. And then, yeah, these different things in my life kind of went on. And I just didn't have the tools and awareness around it to actually understand how to cope in a healthy mechanism. And so what my body and my brain kind of knew was like, the eating disorder keeps you safe, it gives you that love, acceptance, all those different things. So yeah, my parents and life kind of presented me with these different things. And then I relapsed into another round of eating disorder. And I was also diagnosed, I should say, with anorexia nervosa as well. That's the eating disorder that I did have. But yeah, I went through then a second round of this, and at this time things got worse. I literally felt like there was something in my head that was like conducting every thought, action, whatever it is throughout the day. Like it was so loud in my head that I'm like, I generally felt trapped in it the second time around. Like I could not explain it. I was like, every thought, everything I would do was just centered around food, exercise, and it was so obsessive, it was so loud, it was so controlling. And yeah, the second time around, it was just kind of on a whole nother level. And at that time, I was mainly just doing like yoga, and I was just like walking religiously. Like I was that person that was like walking around my streets at like 9 p.m. at night trying to get my steps in. But yeah, I was doing a lot of that. And I thought again, like I was being healthy. I was like, oh, you know, like I haven't fallen back into that. Like I'm fine, you know, like I'm just eating healthy. And again, I started to lose weight, started to get that affirmation around like, oh, you're looking great and things like that. I think this time around, my family and friends were like more aware of it, and they would kind of be like, oh, you know, if you are getting a bit thinner again, like, you know, you should eat more, and different comments like that were made. So I think there was more awareness around at that time. And I think even speaking to friends years on, like they're kind of like, oh yeah, I kind of knew there was like something going on during that time. But even this time with my eating disorder, like the first time I was very restricted. Like I wasn't eating a lot of food. As I said, I wasn't eating out. I was only eating like the 3 things. But I guess this second time around, I was eating like 6 times a day. I was eating, you know, healthy foods. I was eating more variety. I was eating out on the weekend. I was, you know, enjoying the pastry and different things like that, but it came with so much guilt and so much obsession. And I guess the quantities of my food were tiny, and I would eat just like frozen zucchinis and just make like the most random concoctions of food that really just had so much volume and no calories or no energy to it. In that process, went through another round of this eating disorder, and yeah, it got worse. I got down to like an even lower weight, and again, I just hated my body. I hated the way I looked. I literally remember getting out of the shower one night and my hair was like falling out, and I was sitting in the shower like crying my eyes out because I was like so scared. I was like, my hair's falling out, like I don't have my period. I also had like gotten a bone scan, and that was like low, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna get osteopenia, like all of these things. And so I was so scared, and like the little girl in me was like so afraid, but equally at the same time I was so scared of getting help. I feared so much gaining weight because I was like, if I gain weight, people will judge me, I won't feel accepted, like all these different things. And it only took me like probably a year into my recovery journey to actually really understand for myself like why I had an eating disorder, why it was there, what was coping, like why was I using it as a coping mechanism? Why did I not feel good enough? Why did I not feel loved? Why did I not feel accepted? Because at the start of recovery, like the main goal is to get you nourished and to get your body and brain actually thinking properly. And then it's like we can actually do the work, right? Like do the work on the deeper layers of the different things. That is why you're resorting to this control around food in your body, why you don't feel good enough, right? All these different factors. So I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to recover because that means I have to gain weight. And if I gain weight, I generally thought my life was going to end. I was like, people will judge me, like all those different things, which when you say those out loud, you're like, would I actually want to have friends that would not be friends with me because I gain weight? Like probably not, because they're probably not good people, right? So it's like when you start to actually say these things out loud, you're like, oh yeah, like true. But in my mind at the time, the fear of gaining weight was just so strong and so loud. And then I finally got to a point where I was sitting in the doctor's office one day and they were like to me, you need to either go to a hospital or you need to commit to recovery, commit to like outpatient treatment. Because at that time I had tried for like my doctor had brought it up at the start of this certain year. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll work on gaining weight and things like that. And for those 6 months, I kind of gave myself this period where I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to like work on this myself. Like I was studying nutrition, right, at the time. So I was like, you know, I know what to do, right? Like I know the thing, but I couldn't actually put it into practice. And that's the thing with an eating disorder and why accountability and support is so, so important, because it's like, I guarantee you know you need to eat more. I guarantee you know you need to do X, Y, and Z. I guarantee you know you need to not exercise so much or take more rest or whatever it is. But it's like actually doing the thing and having that support and accountability is a whole nother conversation. So I gave myself 6 months to like recover and actually step towards recovery. And I just got worse in those 6 months because I was doing it on my own. I didn't want support. I hadn't even let really my friends and family into my journey because I was so ashamed of having an eating disorder. I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to be that person, like, you know, all the different stigma and thoughts around it. During that time, like my anxiety and depression just got worse. I was struggling so bad with insomnia. The amount of nights that I would just not sleep, I would literally just stare at the wall and just like cry and have panic attacks during the night because my body and brain was so malnourished that it just physically couldn't sleep. And so that only then made everything worse. Like not sleeping just made all the thoughts worse, everything. So it was just like this spiraling cycle. And I actually remember my 21st birthday, the week leading into my 21st birthday, I hadn't slept the whole week. It was like the worst week I had ever had in my life with my insomnia. I literally was like a shell of a human. Like I look back on photos of my 21st and it was such a beautiful day, and I do remember just having such a beautiful time with my friends and family. But like I look at who I was and I'm like, the lights were on but like no one was home. Like I was just so deprived physically, mentally. Like I was so exhausted. Like I was just so unhappy and I was just so sick, really. And that's what an eating disorder does. It just takes and takes and takes away from your life. But it's so hard to see it when you're in that. And you can only really truly see that when you are out of it. That is what, like leading into my 21st, I couldn't sleep. I was having panic attacks all the time. My anxiety, my depression was just getting so much worse. And that weekend, I literally decided, I was like, I need to commit to recovery because I can't do this anymore. I tried 6 months to try and like get myself, you know, at least one step further ahead. And I just got worse. I just got sicker, and the doctor was like, you need to do something now, otherwise you need to go to hospital because your life is getting threatened at this point. And I think that was like the first wake up call I had to like actually do something about it. And I kind of needed that, I wouldn't say it was a threat, but I kind of needed that kick up the bum to actually take this thing seriously, which is why even when I talk about eating disorders, like they are serious. They're not a vanity thing. It's not a thing of like, oh, you just need to eat more, right? There is so many levels to it. They affect your health, physical, mental, like every aspect of your life. And they are serious, right? Like they do have a mortality rate that is extremely high. It is really important that they are actually taken seriously. So that was a bit of my journey with that. As I said, I had like the worst week of my life when I was 21. I finally then after that week was like, I need to do something about it because I am so unhappy. I went to the doctors the next week. I finally booked in to see a different psychologist, one that was actually specialized in eating disorders. And I remember the night that I like signed up to work with them, I spent the whole night crying on my bed. because I knew I was going to gain weight. And that was, again, like the biggest thing for me and the biggest fear that I had in my life. And I spent the whole night literally like crying my eyes out because I was like, I just committed to recovery and I know that means gaining weight and that's the last thing I want to do. And I guess like the little girl inside me was just like so afraid and so scared because she had connected that to, you know, all these different things of like rejection, not, you know, being accepted, not being loved, like all those different things, which that was a whole nother thing that obviously I worked on later in my recovery journey. I finally started my recovery journey. I went on medication, and my journey with medication is that it has honestly saved my life. It was the thing that took away those intrusive, invasive thoughts in my mind that weren't going away. And I tried to, you know, work on recovery, work on my journey without it. But honestly, like taking medication, it not only allowed me, the certain medication I went on an antipsychotic and it made me actually be able to sleep at night. When I was able to then sleep at night, I was then able to think better the next day. I was able to actually make more cognitive decisions to actually fuel my body the next day. Even though there were so different aspects of my recovery journey, me actually taking medication honestly saved my life. And it is one of the biggest things that I will always talk about in my mental health journey because I think it's still so taboo. And I'm all for like doing all the things, but there also is a time and place for medication. So I then started my recovery journey and yeah, it was honestly one of the hardest things in the world. And clients that I speak to all the time, it feels like for so long that you are, you know, doing the things that you need to do, which are so scary, which bring up so much discomfort and so much fear, anxiety, guilt, all the different things. It feels like you're doing those things over and over for so long and like nothing's changing until something does, right? And that's the journey of recovery. It is up and down. It is hard. It is not the easy road, right? Like it is more easier. It feels safer for your eating disorder to actually stay in that disorder, right? To stay in the grips of that control, that like, I guess that false sense of control that eating disorder gives you. So yeah, I started my recovery journey. It was the scariest thing in the world because it meant that I had to face all my fears. It meant that I had to face what was truly underneath this eating disorder, right? What was I running from? What was I using this control of this eating disorder around food in my body? What was I actually using that for? Like what was actually underneath that, right? Like I had to look at all those things. I had to look at the places where I didn't feel good enough. I had to look at the stories where I didn't feel accepted, right? I didn't feel attractive, right? Where I thought I had to look a certain way for men to like me, like all these different things that I had to face. And that works hard. Like recovery is hard. And that is why you need support. And I think the only way that I was able to get through it is having that support, having that guidance on that journey, because it is so up and down. And there are so many days that you just want to quit, right? Because it just is too uncomfortable. It can be too much, right? It can be too hard. And so, yeah, I went through my recovery journey. It was, as I said, up and down, all the different things. But it honestly, like, it's that kind of thing where you're doing the things over and over again, and then you get to a point where you're like, oh my gosh, like I actually didn't think about X, Y, and Z, or I just ate this thing and I didn't overthink this thing, right? And it can be up and down. You can have months where you're feeling great, and then other months where you're like, it's really hard. Like at the moment, like, you know, my body, I'm feeling great in it. And then the next moment you're like, oh my gosh, like I've gained too much weight. Like, is this ever going to stop? All the fears that come up along the recovery journey. And I even had in my mind when I did start recovery, I was like, I'm going to gain weight to this amount of weight, or I'm going to gain weight until I get my period back. And then when I get my period back, I have to stop, you know, I have to make sure that I control my food again, like all these different things that you tell yourself. And I think the only time I was able to truly actually commit to my journey and truly able to make progress was when I had to truly like surrender to all of that. I had to actually kind of go all in. Well, not kind of, actually go all in and go, whatever this journey looks like, I have to surrender to it, because right now it is more important for me to face this discomfort, to actually go on this journey so I can be a better friend, so I can be a better mom, so I can have my health back, so I don't have my hair falling out all the time, so my bones are healthy, so I have a period, like all these different things. So I committed to that journey, and during that journey, actually even before I started recovery, I remember lying down again on one of those nights where I just was not sleeping and staring at the wall and literally thinking, like, if I ever make it to the other side of this journey, like I'm going to do everything in my breath and power to be able to help people on their journey, because being controlled by the groups of an eating disorder is so consuming. It takes so much of your life. And I was like, if I ever get to the other side, like I want to be that person that provides hope that it is possible, that recovery is possible, no matter where you are in your journey, no matter how long you've been on your journey, there is always hope and the recovery is always possible. And I'm so grateful and so honored that I get to sit here today and actually even have this podcast to talk about my journey, to actually tell you that there is hope on your journey. If you are going through an eating disorder right now, I first of all just want to give you the biggest hug and say that you are so much stronger than you think. I know that the eating disorder feels so all-consuming at times. I know that it feels so hard with where you're at on your journey, but trust me, there is always hope. There is always another day. There is always another light. And when you reach out and you get that support, I promise you that people will meet you there in that and you will recover, because I truly believe that recovery is possible for everyone. And I believe that on your own journey, that, yeah, if you feel at the moment that this is too much and you can't do it, take a breath, take a moment, but trust me, you can, and that you are stronger than you think and that you can recover. And that's really why I've done this podcast, because I want to bring so much awareness and hope to that, but also other things in my life as well. There were so many times on my recovery journey where I was like, I'm never going to get to a point where I can just eat a meal and not think about things. I'm never going to get a point to where I could just eat a pastry, you know, every day for a week and not think about it, right? Like I never thought that, but I can say, like, with every year that goes on, with every day, right, that goes on, it's like I look at my life now and I'm like, the things that I eat, the things that I do, and I just do not even think twice about it. Whereas previously they were just so consuming. I was always compensating or changing things or always restricting in some other way if I allowed myself to have these things. Whereas now I do these things and my relationship with food has honestly, well, it is honestly the best it has ever been. And it's not to say at a point where I'm like, I don't eat healthy food and I don't nourish my body, because I believe when you truly have a good relationship with your body, you will want to nourish your body with the foods you know that make you feel good mentally and physically, but also understanding that food is there to give us pleasure, and that it is possible to feel normal around food. So that has been my journey. I don't know how long this even has gone for, but that is even in my journey. If you guys have questions about anything on my journey or you want to expand anymore, please let me know. Send me a message on Instagram. I will leave all my links below. But yeah, that is the wrap up of the first episode of In Conversation with Christina. I am so excited to be here. I'm so excited to have you here. I thank you for taking the time out to listen to me today. And yeah, I will probably catch you in the next episode.